Mere mortals.
Welcome, Mere Mortalites, to another round of the Mere Mortals Musings. You have Kyrin here on this side.
You've got Juan on the other side.
Beautiful, and I hope that intro went well because I could not actually hear it coming through. But that is because we are live. We're using some live software here, Riverside, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 7th of February, 2024. This is the Two Mere Mortals, where we dive deeper into a particular topic, a musings episode, generally focusing on pragmatic philosophy, some takeaways you can apply to your everyday real life with everyday real examples. And boy, do I have quite a few for today's topic. We're going to be talking about pseudo conversations. So we were looking up for the actual title for this, and I was like, fake conversations was the initial. I'm like, nah, that doesn't sound right. But pseudo is perfect, and I'll get into the definition of that in a little bit. And honestly, it was because I've had so Juan doesn't know this news either. This last week, I've probably had 6 or 7 conversations which just perfectly fit into this niche of that was a bit strange. I don't really understand what was going on there, so I think it's a topic worth exploring.
Well,
and it was also,
where it's when you start saying, red car, and you start looking for it, you start seeing it more. If you're going to buy a particular car, you see it more. Maybe it was that way.
Well, no, this happened because we switched the topic only a couple of days ago. So all these conversations already happened. Yeah, so it was, and it was initially triggered by a work conversation that you were telling me about, which just sounded hilarious. But there was a couple of other things related to media training and things like that. So yeah, do you want me to just jump into a bit of definition and then getting into what exactly a pseudo conversation is?
Yeah. I want to give me the definition, and then I want to hear at least an example of some of the ones that you've been having lately, and we'll jump from there.
Sure. So pseudo, for those who do not know, means non-genuine, spurious, or a sham. So we're probably going to have to cover what is real and what's a real conversation, or how, if you can judge realness, and maybe even intent of a conversation, because if it's non-genuine, that I think that applies to something that's perhaps where the intent has gone wrong. Conversation, interactive communication between 2 or more people. So it doesn't need to have a purpose per se, but skills and etiquette are important. So I was looking up the definition, and it was kind of focused on the conversational skills, and conversational etiquette is part of it, but not necessarily the purpose of communication. So yeah, I'm really just trying to get at the heart of what is it when you have a conversation. I hope everyone has something like this which they can relate to, where you come out of it just bewildered or confused, and you go I don't know what just happened there. What exactly was that thing that just happened? It was because you can have all sorts of different types of conversations. You can have hard ones. So this would maybe be an intervention with a friend or someone who's going down a wrong route. You can have funny ones, which are just banter. You can have mundane ones, which are just the pleasantries of everyday, ordinary life on the bus or train or whatever. You have serious ones, the D&Ms after a couple of drinks maybe, or at the end of a long night. Argumentative ones, debates, etc. You get the point. There's a whole bunch of different conversations. It's interactive communication. Have I done a good enough job of explaining the topic and what I kind of wanted to get into today?
I think so. I want to hear an example. Give me an example of a pseudo conversation you've had recently, and we'll jump in from there.
Okay, sure. All right. So where should I start with this? Because I have, let's see on my list here. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 conversations, which I participated in most of them. So all right, we'll start off with probably one of the worst, and I've got a little bit of a ranking system right towards the end, but this was the worst one. So my brother's dog Butters, I took him out for my first solo walk with him, and we just went to an area near me, Balimba. And as I was going along, you do have a lot of kind of conversations with people, because your dog meets other dogs, and then you're standing there, and it's oh, okay, dog talk. This is new for me. I've never actually walked a dog solo before, so this is a new experience for me.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone else is yeah, Kyrin, obviously, duh. And so I had these little mini conversations with people, and I had to kind of pretend to be interested in their dog, even though I'm not really, because I'm not really a dog person. And this one lady, So walk up to her. She's like, "Oh my god, your dog's so cute. How old's he?" I'm like, "Oh, he's probably about 4 months old. Just had his vaccinations, and we're out for our first walk. So it's kind of like exciting, something that they can latch onto. There's a few things there." And she looks at me and she's like, "That's not good for them, And I'm like, "Okay." It's just like, "Oh, geez." And then I'm like, "All right, come on, Butters, let's go." And trying to drag her away. And he's lingering with her dog. And then she's like, looks me dead in the eyes again, and she's like, the vaccinations aren't good for people either. And it's just like, if I was witty, I would have loved to have just responded with like, enjoy your polio and hepatitis B, something like that. Obviously, I'm not witty, so I just walked away from it.
Should have been during the month of monthly goals of you being an asshole. That would have been perfect line.
No, yeah. So that was a pseudo conversation right there, I think, which was there was interactive communication between the two of us, but whatever the hell happened there, I felt was non-genuine, or it was like, she was genuine on her part, but it lacked the skills and the etiquette that perhaps you'd find in it was a sham conversation. I came out of that just being like, what the fuck was that interaction? So that's a little bit of a one for you right there, a very minor one. I've given you everything that I'm close to word for word what was said.
What went down?
Yeah, so I do have like a whole bunch of things related to like the intent and the skill of a person, and maybe even just the format of the conversation, but and its genuineness. But yeah, have you got any pseudo conversations that come to mind for you?
And we're probably gonna have to play around with what what we mean as pseudo conversation, because I could see people saying that, hey, well, that was, I guess, a conversation that someone's trying to talk with you about a particular point. You might not care about it, you might not agree with it, but I guess she was trying to play out a conversation of some kind.
Well, I guess that I would argue that wasn't really a conversation.
Well, and this is the
like,
bit
okay.
that I'm like, I think we need to be clear, because does it take both parties or more to claim that it's a pseudo conversation? As in,
no, I think you can have one party claim it is, and the other party think it's was a
something
real,
else. Okay,
a real
because I
thing,
do have an example of today of something similar to this happening.
Okay,
And I'll lay out the scenario as well. So I just want to make sure like we're talking about a similar concept, and then we can get into the details and what it means, I guess, to immortalize, to move away from phony conversations. So I was sitting at a food court today. I was at work. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten all morning. In fact, it was 12:30, and I was like, man, I'm starving. I got to go to the food court, get some food. I walked down there. Now, inside of this food court, there was probably there's a food court where it's about 200 people, man. Lots of people. They got music blaring in this food court, to the point that I got a call from a work call, and I have two phones. In fact, I've got two phones. One's like a personal one, one's a work one. Now, in the work one, it's not connected to my headphones. My personal one is, and so in my work one, I didn't have it connected to the headphones. So I had to have the phone
hold it up to your ear like a Neanderthal.
Neanderthal mode, and I was eating, so I didn't really want to put it up to my head, so I had it on loudspeaker. Right now, I had it on loudspeaker to halfway volume. However, it was so loud in this food court and people bustling about that I was eating my sushi and literally placing my ear to the phone to understand what they were saying and kind of reply back.
Yeah.
About 3/4 of the way through this conversation, and as I'm eating, I see someone come around to my left-hand side. And I thought, dude, there's a homeless person. They're going to come and eat my food. It wasn't. It was this old lady. I'm going to put her at 65 years old. She comes around and then just unleashes on me. Goes, do you have no respect for the public space? I have to move. I can't eat my food between you and this music in the food court. It's unbearable.
Whoa.
And again, it was one of my similar where I didn't really have a funny retort. It was just more like, I just kind of looked at her and I was like, okay. And just got myself off mute, and I was like, continue the conversation. So that, I guess I would pose it again as it's a phony conversation, in the sense that, yes, it was interactive, but there was no there was no deep reason behind it. There was no intent for from my part. I was like, what's going on? You probably could have just moved away. Well, they don't even they don't have to have that. So that's what I'm trying to weigh up. It's is that a phony conversation, or do you just take it as like it's someone just complaining to you when they're talking to you about it?
Yeah, because there is a difference between someone
Like
talking at you,
if I
like
hurl abuse at a homeless person, is that just a phony conversation, or am I being an asshole?
no, that's one where there wasn't really much for you to respond to. If she'd said like, hey, by the way, you're talking very loudly, you've got this stuff on, it's very distracting and things like that, and made it open to like a dialogue, I guess. Whereas in that case, it sounded like she just wanted to unleash on you. So I'd kind of put that close to the top, but I don't know if she was expecting anything back from you. Much like I get the feeling the vaccine lady kind of wanted, like she would have been willing for a conversation, but I'm like dragging Butters out of there. Like I don't want any part of this. So yeah, there can be aspects of that. I think we'll have to just go through it, and some of it just might be us being like, okay, that that was probably only one of the only ones I had, which was related to I guess uh, it's like an antagonistic sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Let's go into this. So intent and skill, I think, related to a pseudo conversation. So when you come into a conversation, I feel like there's a couple of things that are going on. You want to either like convey some information, or you kind of want some realness to it, I guess. You want to know like what's the other person actually thinking or feeling. So like if you're being lied to the entire time, I'd put that close up to their being with like a pseudo conversation. It's non-genuine. You're just receiving lies back and forth. Okay, well, if you're lying as well, so that's one. Or where someone's come in with like an agenda or talking over the top of you, or things like that. So my monthly goal, if you go back to them, one of them has been to listen intently. And so I'm trying to do this, and I'm doing it by focusing 100% on whatever the person in front of me is saying. So uh, in the gym setting, for example, there's a lot going on in the gym. There's pretty girls, there's music, there's people doing things. But when I'm in there, I'm really trying to just hone in on what the actual other person was actually trying to say. And so some of this would be related to fitness stuff. For example, there's a PT there who I'm pretty friendly with, or more to say, he's very friendly with me. Like he's a really friendly guy. There's Max, yes. And he came over today, and we were chatting, and I'm trying to give it my all of being like, let's make this a real conversation here, and not just me telling you a story or him telling me a story, and then things like this. And I think it tends to result in like lopsided conversations if you're really trying to get something across. Or for example, in this case, because I'm really trying to focus on what they're saying, I'm tending to like ask them questions more, so I have time to think and kind of analyze what's actually going on. Like, what are they actually trying to say? And then I can kind of craft a response to it, and not just be in a selfish mode of, now it's my turn to speak. Now it's like actually creating a dialogue, I guess.
See, this is where we're going to run into a challenge with this, because I can kind of think it through on how any conversation maybe isn't deemed a pseudo conversation. But maybe if we,
I wouldn't put a black and white sticker on these either, as in this is pseudo and this is not. I've got my percentage system, so it goes from a 0% up to 100
to 100%. Well, I was going to say it's going to be largely based here on the outcome that you go into with a conversation, because I think in general, like, right, most me immortalites, most of the conversations that you get in, especially the ones you care about, you want to be less pseudo conversations and more an outcome where it's all the things we're talking about, and probably going to be talking about listening in, right? Active listening, it's effective communication, it's going beyond the surface and actual to root of the conversation, things like that. Sure. I think in most cases, what we're talking about here, that's kind of the outcome. I think though, like in the example of a salesman, if I'm trying to sell you something and you're feeding me data, or we're having a chat, basically, like I'm selling you a car, then I might buy tend to be using skills or different maneuvers. And I'm not really, yes, I'm trying to acquire information from you, but I'm trying to sell you a product or of some kind. I would say, well, the outcome there has changed. It might not be like I wouldn't exactly turn it a pseudo conversation, but I would shift it away from the meaning of a conversation. Yes, it is interactive, but it's more a sales pitch. Like it's a sales pitch slash conversation. And if you want to turn that into pseudo conversation for the fact that they're putting a barrier that it looks like I'm getting to know you. I've got another example actually. I have an example to maybe
Yep.
help us illustrate this more. I went to Mercedes-Benz in Brizzy, and I went in with my daughter. Now 9 months old. It was her the day she turned 9 months. We went in there, and I wanted to look for a potential new SUV. So I was walking around. They said, "Hey, we'll send you through someone to come and like help you out." Awesome. This individual, I won't name her. So she sort of came over, helped to show me around some of the cars. Now my darling girl started just losing it. Right, it was
Okay.
right around her time for going to bed. And at the beginning, the salesman lady was like really nice. You know, hey, there's this thing, and I'm asking her questions. She's answering, and it's a conversation, like a genuine, good conversation. And she's
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, that like you have a beautiful daughter," all this sort of stuff you normally say. Cool. Until my girl just like started just losing it, and then there wasn't any of that kind of interaction. That just like fell by the wayside, and you could feel it. There was a little bit of a I'm annoyed that you're here now. Like I'm
Yeah.
annoyed that you as a customer are here with a screaming baby, and I kind of don't want to show you anymore. And it actually ended pretty shortly after that. Partly because I was like, okay, cool, I need to get out of here. But also from their perspective, it wasn't they weren't trying to like keep the conversation or being genuine. It was more like, oh, maybe there's not going to be a sales here. So part of that, I'd go, yeah, it's a phony conversation. Yeah, part of that, I term it as it's a sales pitch. So they're there to sell you something. So it can be murky boundaries, but for sure, I'd say, yes, always a sliding scale, but it definitely depends on the outcome of conversations that we're talking about. But I think largely here we're talking, you know, the outcome of conversations being well meant, listening, caring about what the other person is saying, kind of saying that's the
I,
opposite of a phony conversation
I think it's with
or a
if
pseudo.
both parties come in knowing kind of what to expect. So, you went in there expecting to be sold something and you were trying to acquire information. She goes into that same conversation trying to sell you something and expecting to maybe get a result or not get a result. That's the thing. So I would say like that was 100% real. Both your expectations aligned when you were at the start, and knew what you were getting into, and it sounded like it was going good as well. Uh, and then when circumstances change, and then it's like, okay, well, now I've got a screaming baby here, so you're obviously not giving her your full attention. You're what, maybe like 20 or 30% listening to what she's saying, and the rest is you're dealing with Vienna. She's noticing you're not giving her your full attention, and she's starting to be like, okay, well, this guy's just being like inconsiderate now, or he's not listening. So what's going on here? And that's when I'd say the pseudo-ness came in. And so if you were close to like 90 to 100% at the start, it could have dropped down to, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50%, and that's when it's like the unpleasantness and the non-realness starts to kick in, and you're like, oh, okay, well, this isn't, whatever's happening here isn't as genuine as it was before. So yeah, I think that's a good info. I'll give one here once again because it's kind of like murky what we're talking about, so people can judge this for themselves and then see how my rating system goes with those. So last week I talked about a podcast which was the Dave Asprey and Brian with a Y Johnson. And this is another reason why I wanted to talk about this, because they mentioned in there how they had media training. And when you have media training, I think that's getting close to like the top of pseudo-ness. If you're going into a press conference or something, once again, maybe expectations of the press are like, okay, this guy's going to kind of feed me bullshit and not answer my question. And he goes into it being like, I'm going to try and sell them stuff and not talk about their questions. So maybe for those two participants, it feels real. But if you're watching from the outside, you're just like, what the hell is this? This person's asking questions. This person's, avoiding the question and not answering it. This is what am I watching here? And so like even just their conversation themselves, it seemed like okay, there's a bit of weird stuff going on with whatever they're trying to do, these two guys, and like there were two weird guys as well, so it was, it
Weird to
resulted
begin
in a
with.
very weird conversation.
Mm.
Another one I was watching was Tim Ferriss with Noah Kogan. Once again, this is where the context is, I would say, much more, uh, in this case, kind of like a more realness to it. Tim Ferriss is an excellent interviewer slash conversationalist. But there is this one point in the middle of it where Tim's like, pause, hey, I just got to let you know, like, you've been saying your book title a lot,
Mm.
and like we have to cut it out. It just comes across as being too pushy or too much. Like I don't want it
Mm.
like that.
I
I don't
like
want
I
my
like that Tim kept that in the podcast as well.
yeah, because Noah was really cool and said, thank you for the feedback, and they both agreed to keep it in, and so like they just kept rolling. So yeah, that was excellent. So once again, that's like, okay, up until that point, I would have said like, yeah, man, really genuine conversation between these two guys. They're talking about topics. Obviously, Tim's the host, so he's asking more questions and things like that. But then there was this bit creeped in where the illusion was kind of broken, and you're like, oh, okay, so Noah's there to kind of spruik his book as well. So it's not like 100% a real thing going on. There's a little bit of something beneath the surface as well. He's trying to do a bit of a sales pitch to the people at home, because he's not trying to do the sales pitch to Tim. He's doing that for other people.
Mm.
So once again, I'll give my ranking system a bit later, and if you wanted to, you can see how yours
Wordle stuff. Okay.
adds up to mine. But two things that seem very similar: two podcast conversations, one where there's a host on either side, and it's just two people. But I think you can have very different outcomes of the realness or the genuineness of what was actually occurring there.
Can you think, just as another example to put for people, what would you say of all the podcasts you've listened to that you go, yeah, that's probably one of those podcasts that's really quite genuine conversation versus maybe, trying to sell a particular point or a reason or a brand or something like that versus maybe the one that you'd be like, whoa, that was like heavy pseudo conversation. Like you could tell that there was other outcomes than a genuine conversation to be had.
Yeah. I think Joe Rogan's probably the top of the list for person who's had the most of them, and that's why he's skyrocketed, because he's genuinely interested, and you can't fake it over the 4 or 5 hour episodes that he does. And
Well,
probably
if
especially his earlier episodes as well. So like the
if
first
you want to
500.
see an example, actually, and I'll pull it up just to make sure I don't get it wrong, but he had a recent conversation with a lady. By the way, I believe he's re-signed his deal with Spotify, but he's able to go back onto YouTube now, something like that, apparently.
Yeah, so it's not exclusive to Spotify.
Yeah,
So
crazy.
Spotify will
Cool.
still hold the rights, but yeah, his they'll put the audio will be available on any podcasting app, podcasting 2.0 apps included in that. And yes, I believe the video is going back up onto YouTube as well.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do you reckon you'll start
A
watching?
win for open podcasting. I'll be much more likely to. I don't know if I'll
So just to give an example for people who want to see it. He had a conversation 25th of January with a lady called Diana Walsh Pasulka, which is Joe Rogan.
Never heard.
And right at the beginning, the Diana sort of calls out that they talk about aliens and like it was religion and all this sort of stuff.
Okay.
But right at the beginning, she kind of calls out and is like, yeah, I'm a bit like scared that I'm going to be talking about this particular topic, and there's going to be so many people listening to this podcast and whatnot. And you could tell very genuinely at the beginning, Joe was like basically saying like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't give a shit how many people, like, I just want to talk to you and talk about this particular thing. And I think that, to me, because I was going to say similarly, it's, if you want to see an example of just a genuine conversation, it is purely just one person talking to another and trying to get to the, I guess you call like the topic at hand. That's the outcome. Yeah, you can't go too far beyond that. Like, it does way better than we do it, because a lot of the times when we're talking, there's things in our background where like, okay, we're thinking sometimes about, the more lights out there and what they
just had to respond to a little comment then. So that reduces the genuineness of this one for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, that's an example. What about the opposite side? What's a
look, I'm trying to think of one which comes off right at the top of my head. probably I think Sam Harris had one with Ezra Vox once, I believe, and that was just a very kind of like you can tell it when it's like not flowing smoothly, or maybe the first one that he had with Jordan Peterson is probably another good example of that's maybe like one of those middle ones where you're just like I don't really know what's going on here. Like this doesn't seem to be progressing forward. They're getting stuck on semantics, or they're talking past each other and not really like there's a lot of confusion and non-understanding going on, which I think can also be a kind of indication or a sign. And I don't have one out of my pocket, but there are certainly podcasts where the guest will pay to be on the podcast. And now I think by US law, so I don't know what the law is here in Australia, but by US law, I believe you have to state that explicitly at the start of the conversation, or make that known that this is a paying guest to come on here. And they're talking about their products or things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, but actually,
if
you don't say that as the host, that's 100% something that's like meant to come across as genuine. And here, perfect example as well, which is the fake podcasts on TikTok. You seen these?
No.
So it'll be someone who there was this one dude in particular who he had this backdrop that looked like the Joe Rogan backdrop, and so he was pretending like he was speaking with Joe Rogan, like as if he was in the actual studio. The funny thing was they had the correct mics and everything, but they didn't even use the mic. They were just using like phone audio for
shitty like audio.
So that's one where it's like someone 100% trying to come across as if they're in a real conversation, and it's just like fucking bullshit,
Damn. Well, actually, and I wouldn't really be able to specifically call out a podcast. Again, we've only listened to like a minute percentage of all the podcasts out there.
Yeah, and we'll probably, if we see or feel something's off, I'm not going to stick around.
You're not going to continue. Yeah. But I do remember this is the early days when we were doing the podcast stuff, where I looked into I can't remember the name of it, but there's apps and there's websites for this, where you can put yourself down as, hey, I have this podcast or I have this platform. If anyone would like to jump on and have a conversation or an interview, like jump in. And similarly, on the other way around, you can kind of put yourself down as an individual that wants to be interviewed. That's getting close to having some sort of pseudo conversation, because it's not like, it doesn't feel genuine. You're doing it for the numbers, for the volume, for whatever it may be.
We got a couple of those emails today of people who were like, this person would be great to come on for whatever reason, and it's nice when they actually put our names at the top. I think they did that recently, where it was like, hey, Juan, Kyrin, and team, and it's like, oh my god, you spent the 5 seconds to actually bother with our names. So there was a Luna Gem in the chat. They said, hear what they aren't saying, and I think that's a good point, because I wanted to ask you, what are some signs perhaps that you think something is a pseudo conversation, or when any ways to identify if someone's perhaps talking with an agenda and it's not a real thing going on. And I think that was kind of like a little good point that they had, that Luna had there, which is sometimes you'll hear the things that they aren't saying. So if they've been asked a question and they're like, and it's perhaps like a little bit of a pointed question, and they're like skirting around the topic, or they're talking about nuclear energy or something, and they don't talk about the data at all, and they immediately jump to the fear mongering, or like Chernobyl's going to blow up, think of the kids, won't somebody please take out the children, that sort of stuff.
So just something at this point, so this is, and maybe we'll touch a lot more on it after the Boostagram Lounge, but from a moving, so as an individual, like someone in a conversation, moving it from a phony or a pseudo conversation into a more genuine conversation, there's a very I think it is, and I was going to ask you this question, we can talk about it later, whether it is a trainable skill, or just a skill that you kind of just possess as you grow up from a young age to be able to assess whether you're hearing what the person isn't saying. I'm going to give you an example. So what you just, like an example you just gave there, it's having the skill set to kind of push beyond, yes, listening to what the person's saying, but getting that, whether it's a feeling or the understanding that, hey, there's actually something either more deep rooted here that they're not actually saying, and I need to get to that point, or kind of like brute forcing your way past those barriers to the real intent. But I think it takes some real skill, either because A, you don't have the connection with the person to get that deep quickly, or B, you do have that connection, but it's about almost having the fortitude to just do it, like the courage to do it. That's hard. That's hard, because even it can be in the back of your mind. You might be. This is a random example. You might be talking to a random person, and you're asking about the day, and are you okay, and how's everything, and you can see them. They're like, yeah, it's kind of good, but you can tell, yeah, you have like this. You hear what they're not saying, so you're technically having a pseudo conversation about. You're asking this person how they are. They're kind of lying to you, or they're not telling you the full thing. If you're also not then encompassing or penetrating to the conversation, it's a pseudo convo. If it didn't happen, you're not actually telling each other anything more than lies or just very superficial thing. But it takes some fortitude to push past that boundary to the things you can see, you can hear, but you're not, they're actually not saying, to get to that more deep rooted conversation to be had. But there's skill sets that come with that to do that.
Oh, 100%, man. And it's the ways of tackling something as well. So I had a little example here, which was, why was it that I've become over the years just spent more time looking at Zen and Buddhism than I have at, say, like Christianity, for example. And I think they're better marketers. Like, I've never had a Buddhist person really come up to me and like try and sell their religion. Whereas I can think of so many times where I've had the very explicit, they come up to the door and they're trying to pitch me Jehovah's Witness style or something like that. Fine. I kind of, once again, I kind of know what I'm getting into when I open the door like that. And it's like, oh, okay, I know what's happening here. So there's like a bit of realness to it there. I've had the other ones where you think you're just talking with a person, and then they're building in this lead up to spruiking you, like, oh, by the way, Jehovah's Witness, go to this website. I've talked about this on the podcast before, many a year ago. It's like 2 years ago, where this lady like got me to download an app, like, because I thought it was a different app that she was talking about, and it actually was just like a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness like application. I'm like, what the fuck? What just happened here? Like, this is the weirdest shit out.
Man. Sneaky, got you.
And it can and yeah, people are definitely better at this. And here's another one that was in the gym very recently. It's an older gentleman, but he's pretty well built, put together. He obviously cares a lot about fitness. I chatted with him a couple of times before, and he's a really cool guy, really cool. And we're just talking about something, and I mentioned bro science. I can't remember how it came up, and he got real excited, and he was like laughing, and then he's like, "All right, I gotta tell you something." And then he kind of tells me about this thing that he's working on, and it was basically a fitness box type thing, like a home gym, 1.3 meters by 1.2 meters, I believe. And it's got all these cables, and it can do this and can do that. And he spent a whole lot of time, money, effort onto it, creating this thing. He originally created it for some friends during the COVID time, or like just peak COVID, past COVID time, all this sort of thing. And he was very much like talking at me. And this was where it's like, if other people, I've had this before, people just talk at you, and sometimes it's about some really boring shit and you don't care. In this case, I kind of did care, because he was interested. Like, he was telling me a story, he was making it funny, he was making it interesting. He was still talking at me, so it still lost a little bit of the interactiveness, and perhaps it wasn't exactly the conversation I thought I was going to have with him. But he was funny. He was like really selling it, and he got to the point eventually, and why the bro science was funny, because he's kind of like labeled the brand as sort of like a bro sciencey type thing, even though it's more serious, right, and like scientific. And that was one where I was like, okay, this guy was, if another person had done this to me and talked at me like that, I would have found a way to escape it sooner, and just kind of like get out of there. But because he was good at it, I was like, all right, this is this is enjoyable. Yeah,
like, I'm gonna stick around.
It's not 100% what I was expecting, but it was still worthwhile hanging around and hearing him out, and because he was passionate about it. And passion is also probably like another that I'd put that as an indicator of genuineness. If someone's passionate about what they're talking about, then I'd probably put that as a higher level of likely to be genuine.
Yeah. Oh, it's a part of, I guess, the authenticity. Like it gives you an idea of whether a person's actually being authentic if you can see them almost like letting loose and just letting the passion flow, as opposed to the almost like jarring or forced version of like you're talking about something else and then pulling it back and be like, anyways, yep, buy this car.
And if they're asking questions as well, another great one I always love to see this is when someone is on someone's podcast. So it'll be like Noah on Tim Ferriss's, but he asks questions back to Tim, because that's what you get in real life conversations. A lot of time it's questions being asked back and forth, and it's not just interview style.
Exactly. And I mean, we'll talk about it in the after the Boostagram, but it's an example of difference between my interview with Toph and my interview with Emil. I want to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned it. Let's jump into the Boostagrams, man.
Let's do it.
I'm keen as bean.
Boostagram Lounge.
So for those who don't know, Boostagram is a message that you can send directly within a podcasting app, and it has to be a good one. So it has to be one which has all the cool new features of things like transcripts, being able to search them, of being able to like create clips within in the app itself, of seeing our chapter images, which I always put in there. And you're able to send us a message directly within the app with a payment of money attached to it, Satoshis in this case. Good apps to do this on places like Fountain, Podverse, Castomatic, True Fans, places like a Podcast Guru. Shouldn't forget them. And we call them out on the show and thank these people for helping to support the show and also give us some feedback of in content. So Juan, what do we got this week?
I can hear the excitement here from Kyrin, because it is a good week for the Boostagram Lounge.
It is.
We've got Dave Jones.
He's back. He's back.
The boots for the Be Immortal Nation, 12,112 sats using Cron.
Legend. Thank you, Dave. He's so good. So good. And
back. Thank you very much, Dave.
It was perfect timing because I'll talk about it a little bit later. But perfect timing. Thank you, Dave. Immaculate as always.
Thank you very much. Then Joe Martin Music. Great episode. 5,000 sats using Fountain.
Thank you, Joe Martin. I believe that was for the one I did with Nick.
Yes,
I imagine most of these were. Yeah.
Now I know you're going to get excited about these two, so I'll say them fully. We had Boulder Dash Boys.
Yep.
I said two different boosts here, but both are 30,000 sats using Fountain.
Oh yeah.
Well, the first one, actually no. My apologies.
They're the same. No, so I was trying to verify this. I think they might have sent it twice, so I'm definitely gonna have to send some back to them. Because I was listening to one of their episodes just now, and I was like, yeah, I definitely need to send some back.
I think it was double. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was double. All the data says it is, but like the Satoshis.stream. I believe Albi. Not all of it, because I don't think Albi had it. So yeah, I need to see.
Yeah, we need to verify. In any case, the comment there was incredibly important interview about the future of Fountain.fm and their insights into marketing and audience growth. Well done, Kyrin. So that was obviously with the conversation there with Fountain as well. So
yep. So that was either Wes or sorry, apologies, I've forgotten the other guy's name. But Beer Bourbon and Boulder Dash is their podcast. And you know what? It's crazy, man, because I don't like beer, I don't like bourbon. Boulder Dash, yeah, it's okay. It's an all right game. It's somewhat interesting, but they spend probably like the first 25 minutes of the episode talking about things I don't really enjoy. But because they have chapters, I skip to the parts where I do enjoy. So,
mate, I can't attest more to that. I'm starting to find myself doing that with a lot more podcasts, especially when they've got chapters.
Yeah, YouTube as well. It's like critical.
I'm actually disliking the players out there who don't have them. So
what was it? The Tim Ferriss, Noah Kogan. When it first came up, they had no chapters. I refused to watch it. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna even bother.
I don't waste my time.
Yeah.
And the final one here, Cole McCormick, he sends a row of ducks, 2,222 sats using Fountain. He says, great episode. I stopped listening to it here because of his Outlive book. See, this is interesting. He had a very random, cozy sentence about the COVID vax being innovative. 5 boosters later, that ain't longevity. Doctors making money off of speculation is insane. The future of medicine is personal. No universal diet. You need to follow your own biology. That's interesting. No, I haven't actually read, and I didn't actually realize that Atia called out so specifically that in the book.
Are you going to read that book? Is that on your list?
I think I have gifted it to my dad, so I'll probably will end up reading it at some point. It's not for any it's probably not in the next few months.
Gotcha. Yeah. Look, I don't know much about the guy personally and the book, but there's one of those ones where I know Cole feels very strongly about the COVID vaccine and things like that. I'm probably like on the middle ground.
I'd be in the middle.
Cole's just like, he's listening to the convo I had with the dog lady, and he's just like, man, that was fucking real. That was the realest shit I've ever. Kyrin, you idiot.
I would say similar in the way that Emil is, and why you probably would dislike a lot of Peter Attia in the same way if you disliked a lot of the way that Emil came across, because he's very strong in the views that he sort of sometimes holds, and he's pretty direct with it. He had a conversation with Tom Billy recently that I was listening to, and there was even parts of it that I was like, whoa, that's pretty hard hitting. There's maybe how Andrew Huberman might be a little bit more open to, not open, but I guess kind of showcase a little bit more of the cloud or the haziness that can exist in science. Peter Attia can get pretty just direct and like, hey, it's 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram. That's it.
Okay.
That's fucking what it is. So, and I'm like, well, I guess, it's definitely some variations, but he's very direct with a lot of his calls now.
Yeah, I think Cole's right though. You got to focus on your own sort of thing. It's got to be individual. The herb. There's a lot of. I mean, the snake oil salesman as a meme, as a thing, has existed forever because health is like one of the most crucial things, and people try and spruik your shit, man. They whether it be the herbal remedies or whether it be the 150 pills per day. There's people are trying to sell you shit. That's an area where you gotta keep your wits about you, I think.
That and I think it's important to remember that in the group or in the herd or in the largeness, the statistics are important and make sense. But the outcomes that come out of a group or a herd mentality, or the outcomes that come out of that gigantic mass of people, don't always translate directly to the individual. So just because from a statistical perspective, he does say that, hey, you should probably be eating this amount of calories and blah, 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 blah. Hey, you should probably know just in oneself what that actually means specifically. As we saw just recently, our mates were talking about the gym. We went to Kyrin's gym just recently, a beautiful place. And, all of us had different metabolic ages. Now, if you just kind of thought like, hey, we're all the same age, we're all about the same weight, cool. So your base metabolic rate should be about here. No, it isn't. When you actually look individually, we're all kind of slightly different. By
I'm
the way,
16.
Do you know what the metabolic age means?
I have no idea.
It basically means that whatever that age was provided is what, on like as a standard, the lower it is to your actual age, it means the more calories you burn in a sort of sedentary mode. So you burn calories at the rate that I guess a 16-year-old would, and I would burn calories in the rate that an 18-year-old would in just like standing metabolic condition. Obviously, the older that is, the slower the rate is. What it just means is we can consume more calories and burn them without even having to train as much as maybe someone who has an older metabolic age. But those numbers, you could kind of say and say, well, all of you guys are 32 years old, 31 years old. You should all be roughly eating this amount. Wrong, because to the individual it's very different. But statistically, an average, you could go, okay, yeah, you could make a good call on the average, but the average is not the individual.
Yeah, you know what? That kind of makes sense actually, because I've always kind of said, whether I train or not doesn't seem to really matter. Because when people are always like, oh yeah, if I do an extra 5Ks on the treadmill, like I really like the weight really comes off or something, and I'd be like, man, I ran fucking half a marathon today, and I still ate the exact same as I would if I did nothing, and my weight doesn't change. Yeah. Right. Okay. Cool. That's interesting. Thank you.
If someone wants another example, by the way, of this really clear one is like, why it's different between averages and individual. There's always the famous saying that when Warren Buffett walks into a theater, an empty theater with a group of people, all of a sudden everyone becomes a millionaire.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like
The average wealth. Yeah.
the average is very different to the individual. So.
Yeah, definitely. All right, very good. Thank you everyone for doing that. I did check the PayPal. Nothing coming in on the PayPal this week, and yeah, probably should just call that out as well. If you did want to support the show and you're like, Boostagrams and changing my podcast app, I don't want to do that. That's fine. We have a link down in the show notes where you can send that in. We actually sent Nathaniel's very generous $10 off through to Podverse LLC as a thank you to Mitch for creating the Podverse app and doing really awesome work with that. And we try and help out developers. I never really mentioned it, but 10% of this very podcast goes to developers as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for doing that. Let's jump on to perhaps the format one. So no surprise here, but the medium matters in terms of having a conversation. In real life beats a video call. So, pseudo-ness is already, I'll take off 5% maybe just for the very fact that we're doing it like this.
Okay.
Which beats a phone call, which beats, email, which beats texting, which beats Morse code. I'm not sure you can really get lower than Morse code, perhaps smoke signals or something like that.
Smoke signaling is that's all I had. Yep.
Yeah. And so, I had a truly bizarre convo yesterday, and I call this a convo. It was a text conversation with a really old friend of mine, and it was just, I was like, I can't believe they just sent me that. That's like the most ridiculous thing. Flabbergasted. I was flabbergasted.
Flabbergasted.
They were
share now. What was shared?
Oh no, I can't, man. I actually can't. It was it's too much. It's too much. But they were genuine in what they were saying. They were trying to give advice, basically. They were trying to give advice, and I was just like, there was no skill nor etiquette in how you did this. I was shocked that they actually sent through what they sent through. And so I think like the medium really matters, and so even if you have like the genuineness, the quality of the conversation, the realness, the phoniness, the scamminess, or I'd say realness just as a quality degrades if the medium is imperfect. So in real life, I don't know, does anything beat in real life in your eyes, or do you even agree with this?
I do agree. I think the principle of, as you mentioned, from real life to video to phone call or audio to text and all that. Obviously, the up the food chain you are, the more realistic the conversation. I guess I'm just trying to put it into other words. I guess there's an essence and a multitude of information that I guess arrives in a conversation when you're able to be in person or a video that doesn't when it's an audio and text form. So of course, with text, you're not getting the body, the body positioning and the way the eyes are darting or the sweating or the, as Luna mentioned, the things that, they're not saying, but can you hear them still? Well, of course, you're not going to see them in text, right? You have no idea what that potentially is. So yes, you're missing a lot of that value that's available in just information as part of the mode that the convo happens. But I think that there also is it's kind of like a middle ground in that the more rudimentary the mode gets, and this might not be global, so challenge this, but I think for me, Immortal Lights, I'll say it this way. For me, if I'm in person, one-on-one with a person in real world, right? I'm not talking digital world or something, I can get 80% of the time, not everyone, but I can get to general good conversations or a deep conversation if I want to. If we need to get to that position, it can be had. And I like that. You can get the input from the other person from, all different ways. However, when it comes into like video and audio formats, at least for me, I do find it challenging to do that. Now, this is just personally. I don't know if other Me Immortal Lights kind of agree with it, or even you do, but I'm not great in having a phone conversation with someone and getting deep or getting real or talking to someone. I was talking to a business colleague of mine today over the phone, and the way that I would generally interact with them in a face-to-face, sort of in person, wasn't the same through an audio. I could tell. You could tell that it wasn't as genuine. There wasn't as much of a care factor. It was more transactional. Maybe it could be said. However, when you go kind of one more rung down to text messaging, all of a sudden it improves
Yeah,
the ability to
I
get
get what you mean. Yeah.
deeper again, or the ability to connect at a more genuine level. Now, I don't know why that is, because there's less touch points and less ability, but I would say it has something to do with in person. Fantastic, top of the food chain, I'd say. But for whatever, at least personally for me, yes, video and text is video and audio are great, and text maybe goes down low in certain amount of inputs. But for whatever reason, I can use text to kind of elevate the connection, maybe because it removes some of the touch points that make it awkward
A
or
non-useful, or
connection.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say that. I don't know if that resonates with people,
No,
but at least I've encountered that.
it does for me, man. Because when I was thinking of this, even just like this video call, I'm kind of like, it's a slight degradation, but for me, some of the skills are better because I don't have to, for example, worry about eye contact or lack of eye contact. It's a bit more natural to be like looking around the room if you're on a video call, or you're looking at your screen, so there's not this like directness that's there. For text, for me, it would probably be like, real life is still probably the best, as long as I'm in the zone, I'm really comfortable with the person. That's probably like the most genuine I'll get. Video call, it's a degradation down, but it's not too much. It's a little bit. Audio only, once again, I think my skills probably lend me towards that, or the cutting out of a lot of bullshit actually adds something to that for me. And while still a step down, it's not too much. But then when it gets to text, like I just plummet, man. I'm not great at text, not great at emails, not my forte. Way too easy to misinterpret the tone for myself of what someone else is saying. So yeah, no, I get what you mean, where it changes, and that probably is just based on your skills as a person as well, and what you're good at. Here's another one for you. So I was listening to Andreas Antonopoulos, and someone was
You're currently consuming every single piece of content he's created in this month that you can unsubscribe.
since I unsubscribed, which was about May of last year. So I've got about like 8 months to get through, 8 to 9 months. And he had this question. Someone was asking him like, "Oh, you ever going to have on Jimmy Song, who's another Bitcoin person, to like talk about a topic that they disagreed with?" And he was like, "No, because that's going to be a debate, and debates in his mind don't illuminate. They're more a battle of personalities rather than getting to like the heart or truth of a matter. Because both sides come in with very there's what debates are. There's a single statement or touch point, and then one side has to argue good for that, and one side has to argue bad for that, or against it, for and against. And this is like the classical debate thing that you'll see in schools and stuff like this. When it comes to that one, it's probably a little bit different, because whilst they might be on the opposing sides of an issue, I'm sure they both have a bit more nuance, so it wouldn't be full on. But I can definitely see that there's the format of why you're coming into something. Here, another example. I had a chat with Trevor Bell yesterday, and it'll be getting released after this. And Trevor is he called me up on this a couple of times, because I just got caught in the habit of thinking of this as saying he's not anti V for V, but he's definitely anti Bitcoin and anti using that method in the apps, or at the very least, maybe not even anti of that. He just thinks the emphasis on that is way too much, and there should be more talking about the PayPal option or things like this.
Okay.
And Trevor's actually a lawyer, so he knows his way around words, and he knows how to have a more debate or argumentative style conversation. I don't believe he was like a barrister or anything, but just the fact that he's a lawyer lent him more to being more comfortable with conflict, perhaps, or better in these sorts of cases. And he was very much playing a devil's advocate sort of role with me on that conversation that we had. I would still rate the genuine level of it still pretty high, But it was once again, it was like, yeah, he came in with something like a little bit to prove, and so did I. I came in something to be like, go V for V. And so it probably took away like the full 100% of it. Another reason would be like that was the reason that he came on to talk about it, and I wouldn't normally have him on as a guest because his interests get this. So the tagline of his podcast is sex, politics, religion, and news, sex, politic, religion, something like that.
Right.
And I'm like, damn, dude, those are the 4 things I like care about the least in this world. That's not up my alley at all. So he came on for a very specific purpose. I think it still went pretty well, but it was still, yeah, it was still like it had a little bit of a debate type tinge to it as well, which
Yeah, look, I was going to say on debates, I think to be the most effective conversation, you kind of have to have a mediator to the debate. Then I'd say, okay, that maybe lends itself to a better approach in the sense of, yes, you're going to have someone pro and conning, but then you have a mediator that might,
less trying to score points, for example.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
try to one up each other as opposed to, okay, we've triangulated to a now a perspective where we've agreed or disagreed on things. Fantastic. Here's one of my summaries I was like coming to with conversations, right, is in the end, depending on the viewpoint of what people, so there's conversations obviously where one-on-one you might have in private with someone, but as they start getting more public, as they start being shared more broadly, it's up for debate in terms of who is watching it, who is listening, and how much genuineness is taken from it, how much someone thinks it's a pseudo conversation, how much something is not. An example here, once again, is Kyrin listened to a little bit of the Emil conversation that I had on the podcast number 102, and you listen to it for a little bit, and then you're like, nah,
His style.
not
I
up
don't
my
like
alley.
I don't like his style of
There's
talking.
a difference to a style now. Whether it's because of pseudo conversation or not, it's more of a, hey, it's just the style, the topic, the idea, not for me, not the way that I want to like consume that information. Fair. But then I had other commentary feedback coming in about, shit, that was really good. Like I really enjoyed listening to that conversation. There was some meaningful to it, as you can hear the genuine, like direct feedback I was getting. And I guess talking about it from this perspective, I go, when you put it into the public sphere, there's always going to be the challenge that even any conversation you even might have that you feel, hey, this was pretty genuine between me, and even the other person says, yeah, this was pretty genuine, this was a deep conversation. You're undoubtedly going to have someone out there that goes, oh, that was shit, that was pseudo, that was.
No, I think you can have the point where it would be like, I didn't like it, so I didn't like it at all. But I wouldn't have called that a pseudo conversation. I just didn't like his style, and I
Well,
might not like what he's saying, or even the debate, or not the debate, but his arguments for whatever he's saying, or if they're trying to prove a point, or if it's data behind it, or something like that. So I think you can dislike something, and it could still be a real genuine conversation between two people. And me personally, I just
that's a
don't
good point.
enjoy what's being
Actually, that's a
said.
good point. But I guess I would, I guess the differentiation I was trying to make a claim there was, you're gonna, whether it's a likable thing or not likable thing, I think once you put it into the public sphere, it's almost it's just a time basis when someone's going to come across it and feel like that wasn't genuine. I'm sure if this was out long enough and enough people listen to it, someone would think, hey, you guys, that's not genuine. You're not really talking. It feels like you're holding back. You're
Yeah,
not
you're
talking
talking in front of a
genuinely.
microphone. You're trying to
You're
do
trying to
this for
spruce something.
You're doing
So
it for clout. The mere mortal's
yeah,
clout.
and so part of me goes, in at least in the public sphere, if someone's listening to this, or you're kind of trying to get to a point where, hey, I want to have conversations with people that I'm sharing that are going to be seen as deep, genuine, authentic, never going to be treated as pseudo, good luck. That won't happen. That just will not happen given enough time and enough people listening to it.
I will give a -1% for any conversation that is made public, just because of it'll have a somewhat of a performative aspect to it, I think.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. The closest, I like, so maybe I'll be, to give an example for people at home, probably the most authentic, genuine, really there for the conversation one that I've had was the second one I did with Toph at my place, because it was in essence a continuation of the conversations that we were having already on a run. There was some back and forth as I think Kyrin gave some feedback around. It was the closest I've had in terms of, hey, that was a genuine conversation. And if I can replicate that a lot more, awesome. But again, there's someone out there that might believe that it wasn't that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I kind of get to a summary of, as much as you want to try, yeah, if you're putting it in the public sphere, you kind of have to give yourself a negative percentage of genuineness just for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I gotta say, like, I still got a bunch of notes here. I'll try and get through them quick. We haven't talked about multiple people and how that can somewhat turn chaotic, and whether because conversations you can have between multiple people. This is definitely one where skill wise I suck at, and it's not my forte. I went to a Bitcoin meetup on Thursday, and what I really like about them is, the presentations they're somewhat interesting, but they're not most. I go into it and I'm like, I'm not there for the presentation. I'm there for the kind of chats with people. And I met some cool people, and there was right in the after bit, there was like the after event, I guess. And we were in small groups, and people just tend to break off into certain things. I was with two other guys and we were chatting. And that was really great. And we were talking about like all sorts of things, technical topics, jokes, chit chat. It was a bit of all over the shop. Once again, not my best, and so skill wise and the realness side, I certainly suffered for it. And then there was like the after event, and so this is when like we're all leaving. Well, lots of people have already left, and there's 5 of us left. And we go down there, and you know how females and males tend to split off into their own little groups and things like that. That's what had happened before. But on the way down, I was with the 2 females remaining, and then there was 2 guys, and they started talking. And man, like we went everywhere. And when I say we, I mean they did, because I put in maybe like two words out of 15 minutes, 20 minutes perhaps. Not once again, not my forte. And it's because like just the style of the conversation was everywhere. They'd go from like global climate warming, whether that's a scam or not, talking about Bitcoin, then it'll be on to like, who are the people who are secretly controlling the world, and then back to Bitcoin, and then onto this other thing. And I was just like, I can't. The way they were talking as well was like, very strident, just putting things out there. And I just went like, I have nothing to really participate here. And if I did try and participate, it would be me just trying to participate just to get my voice in, because I don't really, I can't, I'm not great at just stating like something that I'm very certain of or sure of, and then just like letting that slide or things like that. So the chaoticness, I think, of group ones don't lend for me for realness, although I think they can be more real in some other ways. For
I was just trying to think of, what I think I'd be probably pretty good at.
What's that?
I reckon I could be a good orchestra maestro.
Yeah.
And I say that in the sense that, in a similar way, navigating conversations amongst multiple people, there's definitely an art of orchestrating what's going on. And that definitely falls much more on the skill set versus the genuineness. When it's one-on-one, as long as you're being genuine and authentic, and you're driving your point, and you're talking from the heart, whatever you want to call it, easy enough. You can get to that point. As long as the other person on the other side or the other entity wants to do that, cool, you'll get there. When you got multiple people, it's a skill set. It's very much a practice skill set of, when do you interject, as you were saying, when do you not, when do you know when to pick up the trombones, and hey, the drums need to go here. I don't know if you've ever picked up, when I do this sometimes in amongst our friendship group, but I do this with other groups where, especially with really quiet groups, and I've had this kind of recently, it's just knowing, okay, hey, we've hit a lull here. You kind of know, like, cool, I need to go around the grounds here and get answers from everybody, or I need to go do this. You
Yeah.
kind of know where you have to get the song going, where you get the music flowing. It's just what it is. But it's a skill set. Again, I'm saying some of these things, but it's just a practice of doing it freaking, honestly, at this point, thousands of times. In fact, I would have to say that I've been in a position where I essentially run a daily session of this, where I basically get people to talk in a group, right? And it would be, I'd probably say, out of 5 years of working days, let's say 150 days, at least 5 years. It's more than 500 days that I've done this day in, day out of that example. So, it just takes, there's some skill set that is just ingrained in me now that I've done for a very long time. But I think when it comes into the multiple, to get to what I guess you get more genuine conversations or more well orchestrated conversations, I think that is just a repetition skill set piece.
If you're the conductor, I would be the perfect audience member. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to observe. I might do like a little cough every now and then. And then if someone does something amazing or something awesome happens, I'll be, bravo, bravo. So that's definitely more my part in that analogy. Style. Okay, like last bits before I get onto my summary. The genuineness. Here's 2 examples of what I think are like really non-genuine ones and really genuine ones, and perhaps even a bit more examples of how you can make it genuine. I was coming home from my parents with my brother, and we had 30 minutes just to talk, and we're talking about how mum was going, how we're going, and he was worried about me basically, and so he was just like kind of probing a couple of questions, asking me stuff, and it was not an unpleasant, but it was definitely like a kind of hard conversation in some ways. And at the end of it, I was like, nothing really got resolved. We talked about things. He made me aware of what he was feeling on some respects and like some concerns for me. And I was like, okay, that was 100% real, because I know he cares for me, even if it's stuff that I might not want to hear, stuff that I might disagree with. He was 100% real, and he was doing it in like the skillful way that he did it was not just like blurting out, you should do this. It was like, have you thought about this? I know you're not particularly, I've noticed this when it comes to you don't really appreciate these sorts of things. Another one, a girl at the gym who I was having like a shitty day. I'd seen her before. I wasn't going to particularly talk to her, but I was like, whatever, I'll talk to Zoe. So I was like, hey, Zoe. And then she's just so genuine. That was what I got out of her. Like, she lifted my spirits by just being like a really happy, kind person. I was like, I don't know this girl. Like, I know my brother, but the feeling kind of that I got out from both of those was, oh man, that was really good. I'm glad that happened. I really, really enjoyed that. Maybe not even really enjoyed that, but I came out of it being like, that was real. That was a real thing that just happened. Now, on the other hand, and I wanted to ask you about this, was the coal can't come out. So when I was in the mining industry, there was set deadlines, the coal's got to come out by this date and this time or something. And then, rain events will happen, breakdowns, machines, scheduling stuff. And, I have to tell someone like, hey, like, we have to change the schedule up. Like, this can't come out this date. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, it's got to come out. It's like, okay, well, we could move this around. We could change this up. If we had some extra resources, you could come. And it's like, yeah, no, it's like, it's got to come out. Or like, we've got to blast. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And it's like kind of counter to reality. And I wanted to ask you about your version of this, because you experienced like something really similar recently, right? Which is like, product's got to be delivered at this certain time. You're like, it can't be done. I can do a couple of weeks after that. And they're like, no. It's got to be then. You're like, all right, well, with some extra resources, it could be done. They're like, no. Like, it's just going to be done. You're like,
going to be done.
Okay, well, it's not going to get done. And then it's kind of just like left at that. What the fuck is that? What kind of is that like close to the non-realness as you can get?
Yeah, and I think this is probably, I'll try to extrapolate it so we're not talking to it specifically from a word context, but I think there's a genuine layer of having conversations with the expectation, and you mentioned it earlier, when the expectations are so far apart between what the conversation is about. Case in point here is in these conversations, one party's coming in with the mindset of I've either promised something or I have the expectation that it's going to be met at a certain date or something's going to happen, when the other party or entity is coming in with, hey, I'm coming in with a genuine conversation about why this won't be done, why there's a blocker, why there's an issue. And so again, getting back to the first point is there's two parties coming into this with completely different outcomes. One's just in the mindset of, hey, set date has to be met. The other person's coming in with a, hey, let's have a conversation about why this can't be done and what we're going to do from here. And you're essentially just not talking to each other. There's just this absolutely complete mix up where, as you're saying with the coal or other examples, is, one party saying, hey, here's the issues about why we can't do this, but we can try and do it from X, Y, Z because of whatever. And the other person basically doesn't forget that, just goes, okay, cool, but it's still got to be met by this date. So you got to do that. Well, it's like, no one's listening. Now, you could take from both parties. One could listen to the other and go, okay, I understand that a date's been put. Can we fluctuate it some other way? Can we get 80% of the coal out rather than 100% of the coal out?
Yeah.
But I think it's just it happens with a complete missing of the outcome that you're coming in or the expectation of it. I think it can drive just a crazy phony conversation.
Yeah, I had written down aligned incentives perhaps is what makes for a good conversation. When I was chatting with my brother, both of us are concerned about my health or my well-being and the well-being of our family as well. So that's one of those, driving forces. And you can have work conversations where you're both aiming towards a goal and perhaps you're in the same team and you're like, the goal is reaching 90% productivity or whatever it is. And so you're done most to like focus on that one goal and like, let's get it, let's do it. And then you can have the opposite, which is perhaps you're in competition and that's where they don't align. My incentive's over here, yours is over here. And so they're once again, they're talking about this thing over here and you're talking about this thing over here. And it's just like not butting up. And then maybe even like a lack of...
I'd even get to the point that in saying, if you're at that stage in any type of conversation, then you're almost better off not having a conversation. You're almost better off at just sending each other in a very low fidelity way what you're wanting to get across and send it out to the ether and let it be consumed at the pace that someone else can and let them send it out, as opposed to just what would be just wasting time because no one's listening to each other. It's just people are just putting hot air into the world and wasting energy.
Yep. All right, here we go. My ranking system, much promised and delivered. So I'd consider anything above 75 and 80% as a worthy. I'd consider that like a passing grade. So I've gotten Dog Lady 0%, Old Friend Texting 12%, The Work Kind of BS 23%, Dave Asprey and Brian Johnson 45%. Come on, fellas, pick it up. Gym Guy, that was like 56%. The Bitcoin after session, it was 67%. It was real, but like I just wasn't part of the realness of it. The Bitcoin after session where it was, groups of 3 or things like that, 84%. Tim Ferriss, Noah Kogan, 90%. My chat with Trevor Bell, 93%. My brother, 100%. And Jim Girl, just because she was cute, she gets 110%. So that was my
110% for Zoe. There you go.
That was my ranking system.
Does Zoe listen to the Me Immortal podcast?
I don't. Sorry. Maybe. Oh, jeez, I'm dying.
There you go. The genuineness of the conversation here is absolutely throwing him out the side.
I don't know where that came from. Wow.
As for you, Zoe,
dry throat.
She's probably just listening to this right now and being like, "Man, this dude was such an ass to talk to today."
It could be. Well, how about you? Would you bother with the ranking system at all?
I wouldn't bother with the ranking system, but what I would bother with is the cutoff. The cutoff where conversation is, you can tell that a conversation is a pseudo conversation, and then either A, persisting in the conversation but just not exerting any maximal effort nor care around it. If it's here's an example. Everyone knows it's a pseudo conversation when you go and buy a burger from a McDonald's shop or something like that, and you're going to buy something, and maybe not even there, but when you go into a fast food restaurant, maybe you exchange some pleasantries. No one gives a shit. You're there for your transaction. It's a transaction. Here's some money. Give me some food. Sure, you can make that work, but it's a pseudo conversation. So that's fine. But when it's in other areas, okay, just know where to detach and have the minimum amount of energy so you're not exerting it. So that, I guess, on the opposite side, you're putting in the maximum effort, listening, authenticity, being genuine, maybe empathetic, telling the truth or as much as that empathetically as it meets for the right conversations. Because to do that really well takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of effort, right? If I was to go and have a conversation with whoever, good friend of mine or whatever it may be, I might go there and go like, shit, there's 3 things that I really want to talk about. And then you might not get through any of them because, you're genuinely having a conversation about something else that they get along and you never get there. So you also have to be prepared for all of those eventualities, which do take some pure effort. So I'd just say I'd be more concerned with hitting like a cutoff where I just go, hey, I can kind of tell this conversation is just pseudo. Either it's a default, I'm just putting minimum energy, or I'm going to eject out of that conversation as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I was kind of saying like, probably in terms of length, most conversations you had would be on the more genuine side, above that 80% cutoff. Because the longer conversations you're going to have are with friends, with family, with loved ones. They're probably going to be more aligned on the incentives and in terms of whatever you're talking about. And, unless you're in a specific job or a specific industry where you're more likely to have those kind of shallow conversations, or you're in a really competitive thing and you're trying to sell all the time or things like that, you're probably by default you're just likely to have more genuine ones. That being said, you can put in certain steps to avoid types. With all of those ones that were beneath my kind of 80% cutoff, I'd say like half of them, if I'd been more tactful, or if the people had been more tactful and had a bit more skills, they could have raised that up to a higher level. So, the Bitcoin after session, if I'd been a better participant, or, better at being an audience member rather than debating like, oh, should I try and say something here? Oh, no, that's kind of like, blah, 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 that sort of thing. If I just kind of appreciated it for what it was and been like an outside observer, that would have been better. And so, for example, I'm not going to walk butters alone again. I didn't enjoy those conversations. I didn't enjoy being forced to. I equate it somewhat as being like I was the pretty girl for an hour or 2 hours as I took him out, because Butters is adorable, and I saw the amount of interactions and attention that he was getting, and then me by default being with him, and I didn't enjoy it actually. Like I found it a little bit stressful, to be honest, taking him out. So, but there's and another thing, like I quit work partly because of office politics. It was a low percentage of why I did, but there's a reason I do this with you rather than in a competitive sales industry or something like that, because I don't enjoy them. So there's those. You can have a bit of a play if you improve your skills, if you put yourself in certain situations or don't, you can avoid or have more of genuine ones. But then others, I think you have to just stick to. The gym one with old mate. I don't think there was much I could have really done to have made that an 80% conversation. Yeah. There's certain ones where you're just gonna have to plow through it.
Yeah, but there's also the thing. Not every conversation in life, me and Mortalites, is meant to be a freaking deep dive into the bone marrow
DNM
of fucking emotion. It isn't, man. It isn't.
DNM with your dentist, DNM with your doctor.
I mean, be genuine, be authentic. I've started to do this more and more in some aspects. I think it wasn't a dentist, but it was something equivalent. Where someone asked me like, like it's just the normal question of how your day been, and I've been trying to answer a lot of these less with the all good, or yeah, fine, or what, rather than that, unless there's other stuff to do. being more genuine and kind of just answering with what the reality is, right?
Yeah.
Whether it might be like, well, kind of crappy because this happened, or kind of sore because my knee hurts. Again, there's certain like bits you can elevate to get a bit more genuineness, but again, it doesn't have to be always, right? Not every single person and every single interaction needs to be super genuine. Honestly, if there's someone out there who does that, I mean, great for you, but fuck, it would absolutely waste away my energy to then be really genuine and authentic and deep in the ones that count.
Yeah, it'd be very hard, very, very hard for sure. All right, man. I think that's it. I've got nothing more to add to that. Next week's we'll be talking about financial security. That was meant to be this one, but I wanted to push it back because haven't watched enough Andreas's, and this was a good topic. So
that'll be
that's
good.
the
I've got a developing story at the moment.
Ooh, developing.
A developing story, not a personal one actually.
One's gone bankrupt.
It's someone who we interviewed a long time ago, and they reached out for a particular ask, but it'll tune into that. So stay tuned.
Nice.
It'll bring back some memories from a long time ago if you've been tuning into the podcast from a while back.
Sounds good.
So yeah, it'll be financial security in the next podcast.
Brilliant.
So I guess in short, if you do want to support us, if you've listened to this all the way, big long session today for Musings, and you go,
oh yeah,
you know what? All right, that was genuine enough. I've been sold. I want to support you guys. Look, best ways you can. Kyrin's already talked about this. There's a PayPal, which you can obviously send through directly, but you can try to participate in the Value for Value space with us.
Yeah, I'd call out creating a clip. What was the most genuine or best part that you thought of that of everything that we talked about? That would be a great one. Best place to do that is on Fountain, because then I'll be able to see it and interact with it there. So
it'll probably be the final bit where we just say good bye.
Yeah, see ya. Ciao.
So, but no, you can do it through other ways. Obviously, there's plenty of apps out there. Go and check out our supporters page on our website to go see the many ways you can support the podcast. Yep. We're still calling it out there. We have some shirts still remaining. I'm still in the mindset of creating some new, more custom ones, at least just for me and Kyrin. He didn't like my idea around the come talk to me for the podcast.
Ask me about my podcast.
There might be some 2024 ones that are going to be around the corner, some more custom ones, and so stay tuned. There'll definitely be some of those.
Sounds good.
But there'll be plenty of good fun stuff. But be tuning in. There's obviously a lot more conversations happening beyond the stuff that we're doing now. And one thing that we probably haven't called out, but at least we'll start talking about it a lot more, is in 2024, Mere Mortals are going global. We're going global. So
going all over the shop, man.
Continue to go in different countries and different settings. So if you reach all this way, be prepared for that, because it's going to be some fun, and we'll definitely be needing our consistent supporters of the podcast to give us some feedback as well. That's another thing that's really valuable.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of, just straight up technical changes of how we're doing it. So
Have you listened to one of Tim Ferriss's latest podcasts around him doing a walking podcast?
No.
So he apparently bought like really high fidelity audio equipment because he's been having a lot of lower back problems. So he had a conversation. I can't remember with the guy. I didn't find it that interesting anyway. That's why I kind of like finished it. But the whole podcast didn't come out in video, and it's just purely him and the guy walking around the area with high fidelity audio equipment. But you can kind of hear them go, kind of like panting and whatnot. So we're probably not going to be that level of quality, but give us some feedback, obviously, as we get to those levels.
Sounds good.
All right. Immortalites, thank you very much for tuning in once again, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, live on YouTube and everywhere else. Eventually, we will come to all good podcasting platforms as well, live, but that is
working on
it. It is coming.
Working on it.
But Wednesdays, that's where you can find us. For now, Immortalites, thank you very much for tuning in. Juan out.
Kyrin out. Yeah.